The cowboy didn't know how he'd ended up surrounded by Apache warriors, their horses forming a tight circle around him as dust curled into the air like spirits rising from the ground. The desert sun burned overhead, unforgiving and harsh, pressing down on his shoulders as he stood still, aware that even the smallest movement could be misunderstood as a threat. His revolver was already gone, taken by a silent hand in the chaos of surprise. His horse, panicked by sudden shadows and sharp cries, had broken free and galloped into the open land beyond the hills, leaving him stranded in the very territory he'd been warned never to enter. He was only 25, but the lines around his eyes betrayed the weight of long days and lonely nights spent riding, fence lines and watching over cattle. Dust clung to his boots and jeans. Sweat slid slowly down his back, yet a strange chill settled in his chest as he met the hard, watchful stares around him. These were not men to be reasoned with by charm or excuse. They were guardians of land held sacred for generations. He had crossed into it by accident while tracking a lost calf, driven by simple duty, never realizing his path had led him into forbidden ground. The warriors said nothing as they guided him forward, spears and rifles angled with unspoken warning. He was led into the heart of the camp, where women froze in place and children clung to one another, wide-eyed and silent. Elders turned their faces toward him, whispering among themselves in a low, urgent rhythm that made his throat tighten. Every look he received carried the weight of history, of wounds too old to see but too alive to forget. Then the chief stepped forward. He moved with the certainty of someone who had never doubted his place in the world. His face was carved by sun and time, eyes sharp and deep as the night sky. When he spoke, his voice was low but powerful, rolling through the camp like distant thunder. "You enter land not yours. Tell me why." The cowboy swore his heart had never beaten harder. But he held the chief's gaze and chose truth. "I was tracking livestock, sir. I didn't know I'd crossed this far. If I had known, I'd have turned back." A ripple of murmurs passed through the gathered tribe. Some faces twisted with anger, others with cold indifference. The chief circled him slowly, studying the set of his shoulders, the steadiness of his breathing, as if he were searching for signs of dishonor carved into flesh. Then he stopped in front of him, just an arm's length away. "Words can be shaped easily," he said, "but truth cannot." He lifted his hand, silencing the voices around them. "Before the sun leaves the sky, this man will be judged," he declared. "Until that time, he will wait." The cowboy was led to a wooden post at the edge of the camp and tied firmly, the ropes biting into his wrists. As time stretched thin and the sun began its slow descent, fear crept into his thoughts. He thought of his mother's quiet prayers, of the young woman stood before him, her presence quiet yet commanding, as if the dust itself paused around her. The late afternoon sun traced a soft outline along her dark hair and bronze skin, but her eyes held something deeper than the light, a careful, searching intelligence. She did not rush her words. Instead, she studied him, taking in the tension in his shoulders, the raw marks of rope around his wrists, the steady way he kept his gaze level even as fate hung over him. "You are afraid," she said finally, her voice low enough that only he could hear. He let out a slow, uneven breath. "Anyone with sense would be," he answered. "I'd be a fool to pretend otherwise." A faint, almost invisible curve touched her lips for a moment, then faded. "Fear does not always belong to the guilty," she replied. "But many men claim innocence." She began to walk slowly around him, her steps silent in the sand. "We have been hunted," she continued. "We have been lied to by men who smile and swear they mean no harm. They say they are lost. They say it is an accident. And then blood follows." She stopped behind him, close enough that he could sense her presence. "Give me one reason you are not the same." He thought of all the clever answers he could give, all the things that might sound right, but none of them felt true enough to risk his life on. So he spoke the first thing that came from his heart. "I have a mother," he said simply, "and she believes I'm better than the world sometimes allows. If I were the kind of man you fear, her belief would have died long ago. I haven't given her reason to bury me in shame yet." For a long moment, the only sound between them was the soft whisper of wind moving through the camp. When she stepped back into his view, something in her gaze had softened, though she didn't allow it to show too clearly. Behind her, the tribe had begun to gather again. The day was fading, Shadows stretched across the ground, long and thin like fingers reaching for answers. Elders formed a half circle, their faces unreadable. A few warriors stood with folded arms, prepared for whatever order might come. The chief moved to the center, his expression heavy with thought. His presence silenced every sound. "This man has stepped where he was forbidden," he announced. "By our law, his life may be taken as a warning or he may be released as a mercy. We will choose before the sun is gone." Low murmurs stirred through the people. Some called for punishment. Others, though fewer, spoke of restraint. The air thickened with tension, and the cowboy felt the weight of every voice pressing down on him. Then, before the chief could raise his hand and make the decision final, the young woman stepped forward, her spine straight, her chin lifted with certainty. "You should not speak here," the chief warned, his voice careful yet firm. "I must," she replied, "because the tribe's future is standing in front of us, bound to a post." She turned her eyes briefly to the cowb. The air grew still, so quiet that the faint crack of dry wood beneath a warrior's foot seemed loud as thunder. Every eye in the camp fixed on the chief's daughter as she stood at the center of the circle, the fading sun casting long shadows at her feet. The cowboy watched her, hardly daring to breathe, knowing that the next few seconds would decide whether he lived to see another sunrise. She lifted her chin slightly, her gaze steady and unwavering, then spoke in a clear, calm voice. "He carries no darkness." The words were soft, yet they moved through the people like a sudden, powerful wind. No one spoke. No one shifted. Even the children seemed to sense the weight of what had just been said. In those 4 simple words, she had placed her judgment above fear, above anger, above the memory of old wounds. The chief stepped closer to her, studying the set of her shoulders, the truth in her eyes. He had trained her to observe, to listen, to understand the world beyond what could be seen. If she spoke with such certainty, then he had to honor it, even if his warriors still burned for justice. "You look into him and see only light?" he asked quietly. "I look into him and see honesty," she replied. "And a man who did not come here to harm or to take. He came by mistake, and mistakes are not always born of evil." The chief turned then to the cowboy. He stepped close, examining him once more, as if looking for any sign that contradicted his daughter's words. But all he saw was exhaustion, truth, and a kind of sorrow that did not belong to an enemy. After a long moment, the chief gave a slow, deliberate nod. "Untie him." Hands reached forward and loosened the ropes. As they fell away, pain shot through the cowboy's wrists, but he welcomed it. It reminded him that he was still alive. He flexed his fingers, feeling the blood return, his chest rising in a breath that felt deeper than any he'd taken that day. "You are free to leave this land," the chief said. "And you will leave it with respect." "I swear it," the cowboy answered. "I'll never forget what was given, or who gave it." He glanced toward the young woman, gratitude and something more passing silently between them. She gave him a small, knowing nod, as if to say that some paths, once crossed, were never truly separated again. A warrior returned his reins, and his horse was led forward, calmer now, waiting. He mounted slowly, aware of the many eyes still upon him, but their gaze had changed. What had once been judgment now held awareness, even faint respect. As he rode away from the camp, the chief's voice carried after him one last time. "Remember this, cowboy. Judgment holds power, but compassion holds life." He didn't look back, but he felt the truth of those words settle deep into his chest as he vanished into the open plains. Behind him, the chief's daughter watched until dust swallowed his silhouette, carrying with him a moment carved forever into time, and a connection born from 4 quiet,